The scent arrives first, before anything else registers in your awareness. It is the smell of aged walnut wood, rich and honest, mingling with the sharp, clean note of linseed oil and the faintest whisper of sawdust suspended in still air. This is not the sterile emptiness of a new space, but rather the accumulated comfort of a room that has known purpose and patient hands for many years. The air itself feels textured here, thick with the memory of careful work, as though every object in this quiet sanctuary holds its breath in anticipation of what is to come. There is a particular quality to the silence, not empty, but full, like the pause between heartbeats or the moment before a gentle exhalation. Golden light pools from a single lamp positioned on a sturdy workbench, its warm glow creating islands of visibility in the comfortable dimness. The light does not intrude or demand attention, but rather offers itself like an old friend extending a hand in the darkness. Shadows gather in the corners with a soft density, not threatening but embracing, wrapping around the tools hanging on wooden pegs, the shelves lined with jars of mysterious liquids and tins of paste, the scattered shavings that curl like sleeping creatures on the floor. Everything here knows its place, has settled into its purpose over time, and there is a rightness to the arrangement that needs no explanation. Outside, rain begins its evening conversation with the window panes. The first drops arrive tentatively, tapping with polite hesitation against the glass as if asking permission to create their music. Then more join, and more still, until there is a steady rhythm being played out in the gathering darkness beyond the warm shelter of this workspace. The sound is neither urgent nor demanding, but rather a gentle percussion that seems designed specifically to underscore the peace of this moment, to draw a curtain of water between this quiet room and the wider world with all its noise and hurry. In the center of the workshop, positioned carefully beneath the best of the lamplight, sits a wooden rocking chair. Its form is familiar, the shape that has cradled generations of tired bodies and provided comfort to those seeking a moment of gentle motion and rest. But this chair wears its age openly, honestly. The finish has dulled and cracked in places, worn away entirely where countless hands have gripped the armrests and where fabric has rubbed against the seat over decades of use. There are scratches that tell stories no one alive can fully recall, small dents and marks that each represent a moment in time now lost to memory. Yet, despite this weathering, despite the evidence of its long service, the chair maintains a quiet dignity. It sits waiting, patient as it has always been, ready to be touched again by caring hands. This is where we find ourselves now, in this envelope of warm light and gentle rain, in the presence of wood and tools and time. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else that requires your attention. The world beyond these walls can wait. The concerns that followed you here can rest outside the door. Here, in this moment, there is only the promise of careful work, the satisfaction of restoration, and the deep peace that comes from doing something meaningful with quiet hands and a settled heart. Let yourself sink into this space. Feel the texture of it wrap around you like a well-worn blanket, and prepare to witness something being brought slowly, patiently, lovingly back to wholeness. There is a particular kind of meditation that happens when hands are occupied with meaningful work, when the mind can settle into the rhythm of repetitive motion, and the body finds its own gentle cadence. This is not the forced stillness of sitting perfectly motionless, fighting against the natural restlessness of muscle and thought, but rather a moving meditation, a flowing quiet that comes from doing something with full attention and no hurry. Tonight holds this promise for us, the gift of watching transformation happen one small motion at a time, of seeing patience rewarded and care made visible in the slow revelation of hidden beauty. There will be no drama here, no sudden reversals or shocking discoveries. Instead, there will be the steady accumulation of small actions, each one building upon the last, creating something greater than their sum through nothing more than persistence and attention. There will be the satisfaction of feeling rough wood become smooth under persistent gentle pressure, of watching old layers give way to reveal what has been hidden beneath them, of bringing life back to something that seemed finished with living. This is the alchemy of restoration, the magic of refusing to discard what can be saved, of honoring what has been by making it whole again. Find a comfortable place now. Let your body settle into whatever support it has found, and allow your breathing to find its own natural rhythm. The story we are about to enter is a place of quiet comfort, a space where nothing will disturb you, and everything moves at the pace of careful hands and patient hearts. If you would like to find your way back to our library of peaceful stories, to ensure that a new tale is always waiting for you when sleep feels far away and your mind needs gentle guidance toward rest, a soft tap on the subscribe button will keep these stories close at hand. Our collection grows quietly, one story at a time, each one crafted to be a bridge between waking and sleeping, between the noise of the day and the silence of the night. And now, as the rain continues its soft drumming against the windows and the golden lamplight holds steady in its pool of warmth, let us turn our attention to the figure who stands before the workbench, running his fingers thoughtfully across the surface of aged tools. Let us watch as he prepares himself for the work ahead, as he gathers not just his materials, but his intention, his focus, his willingness to give this task the time and attention it deserves. Let us witness the beginning of a restoration that is about more than just wood and finish, more than just the physical repair of a damaged object. Let us see what happens when someone decides that what has been loved deserves to be made whole again. The evening stretches before us with no deadline, no pressure, no requirement to hurry toward any particular destination. There is only this room, this light, this rain, and the quiet determination to do something well simply because it is worth doing. Rest now in the knowledge that you are safe here, that nothing will be asked of you, that you need only listen and let the gentle rhythm of careful work carry you deeper into relaxation with each passing moment. The chair waits, and the hands that will restore it are ready to begin. Let us enter this space together and find the peace that lives in patient, purposeful motion. Thomas moves through his workshop with the quiet confidence of someone who knows every inch of his domain without needing to think about it. He is a man in his late 50s, though the years sit easily on his frame, written more in the silver threading through his hair and the fine lines around his eyes than in any diminishment of strength or steadiness. His hands tell the truest story of his life's work. They are broad and strong, with calluses earned through decades of gripping tools and guiding wood, yet they move with a delicacy that seems at odds with their weathered appearance. These are hands that can apply tremendous pressure when needed, but can also feel the subtlest change in texture beneath a fingertip, hands that have learned the language of materials through patient conversation. He wears an old flannel shirt, soft from countless washings, rolled to the elbows to keep the sleeves from catching on his work. His canvas work pants bear the honorable stains of his trade, spots of finish and oil that have become permanent decoration, a map of projects past. There is nothing hurried in his movements as he approaches the rocking chair, no sense of impatience or eagerness to simply get the task done. Instead, there is a quality of reverence, of someone approaching something sacred with the appropriate respect. This is not just any piece of furniture waiting for his attention. This is the chair that belonged to his grandmother Margaret, the chair that sat in the bay window of her sitting room for as long as he can remember, the chair where she rocked and read and watched the world outside her window with gentle, knowing eyes. Margaret has been gone for 3 years now, and the chair has spent that time in storage, wrapped carefully but essentially forgotten in the rush of settling her estate and dispersing her belongings among family members. Thomas had claimed it immediately, knowing that no one else would understand what it meant, but then life had intervened as life does, and the chair had waited in his garage beneath its protective covering, patient as always. But recently, he had found himself thinking about it more and more, remembering the specific creak it made when rocked, the way the afternoon light used to catch in its curves, the feeling of being small enough to curl up in it with his grandmother's arm around him, while she read aloud from thick books with gilt edges. Now finally, he has cleared the time and the space to give this chair what it needs. He has studied it carefully over the past few days, assessing the damage with a restorer's eye, noting where the finish has failed and where the wood beneath might need special attention. He has gathered his materials with the same care a surgeon might assemble instruments before an operation, making sure everything is at hand so the work can flow without interruption. More than that, he has prepared himself mentally, setting aside the usual concerns and distractions of daily life, creating an internal quiet that matches the external peace of his workshop. This work requires not just skill but presence, not just technique but attention, and Thomas has learned over his years in this craft that the quality of his focus directly affects the quality of his results. He takes a slow breath now, feeling his lungs expand and then release, feeling his shoulders drop slightly as tension he did not know he was carrying flows out of him and dissipates into the warm air of the workshop. The rain continues its steady rhythm outside, and somewhere in the distance he can hear the soft sound of water running through the gutters, carrying away the day's dust and leaving everything fresh. His heartbeat is steady and slow, a drummer keeping time for work that cannot be rushed. He flexes his fingers once, twice, feeling the familiar pull of tendon and muscle, the readiness of these tools that have served him so well for so long. Then, with the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly what comes next, he reaches out and places both palms flat on the armrests of the chair, feeling the wood's temperature, its texture, beginning the conversation that will continue through the evening ahead. "Hello, old friend," his hands seem to say. "Let me help you remember what you were. Let me bring you back." Thomas's fingers travel slowly across the surface of the armrests, reading the wood like braille, feeling the story written there in bumps and hollows, rough patches and smooth, worn places. His eyes are half closed, his attention focused entirely on what his fingertips are telling him. Here, where countless hands have gripped while settling into the chair or rising from it, the wood has been compressed and darkened by the oils of human skin, worn into a depression that fits the curve of a palm perfectly. There, where children's shoes once drummed against the wood in impatient rhythm, waiting for stories to continue or for cookies to be offered, small dents and scratches create a texture like gentle sandpaper. The finish that once protected and beautified the walnut has broken down in these high-contact areas, flaking away to reveal the bare wood beneath, vulnerable now to further damage, but also ready to receive new care. He moves around the chair slowly, his assessment thorough and unhurried. The back spindles are still sound, he notes with satisfaction. No cracks or splits despite their delicate appearance. The seat itself has a slight depression in the center, where bodies have settled for decades, a cupping that actually adds to the chair's comfort, but which he will need to work around carefully when refinishing. The rockers beneath show wear on their undersides, where they have traveled back and forth across countless floors, the wood compressed and smoothed by friction and weight, but they remain structurally solid, still capable of providing that gentle rocking motion that soothes bodies toward rest. This pleases him. The bones of the chair are good. What it needs is not repair but renewal, not reconstruction but remembering. Moving to his workbench with measured steps, Thomas begins to gather the tools he will need for the first stage of this restoration. His hand reaches without looking to the drawer where he keeps his sandpaper, organized by grit from coarse to fine, each sheet carefully stored flat to prevent curling or damage. He selects several pieces with different grades, feeling their texture with his thumb, choosing by touch as much as by sight. The coarsest paper will remove the old finish, the medium grades will smooth the wood itself, and the finest will create a surface so smooth it seems to generate its own subtle light. He sets these on the bench in order, creating a visual reminder of the progression his work will follow. Next, he selects a scraper, a tool that looks deceptively simple but requires real skill to use well. The blade must be held at precisely the right angle, must be pushed with exactly the right amount of pressure, or it will dig into the wood instead of skimming across its surface, removing only what should be removed. Thomas has used scrapers for so many years that the motion is automatic now, programmed into his muscles, but he still treats each tool with respect, still acknowledges that even familiar instruments can surprise or challenge if approached with arrogance or inattention. He tests the blade's edge gently with his thumb, feeling the sharpness, the slight hook that has been carefully burnished into the steel. Perfect. This scraper will whisper across the wood, peeling away the old finish in thin, translucent curls that will drift to the floor like the first snow of winter. He gathers a few brushes as well, soft-bristled and well-loved, their wooden handles worn smooth and dark from years of gripping. These will sweep away dust between sandings, will keep his work surface clean so he can see clearly what he is doing, will help him maintain the meditative cleanliness that good restoration requires. There is a rhythm to this gathering of tools, a ritual quality that he finds centering, each object selected and placed just so, each instrument acknowledged and appreciated, each element of the work ahead given its proper consideration and respect. Finally, satisfied that everything is at hand, Thomas returns to the chair and settles himself on a low stool beside it, positioning himself so the lamplight falls directly on the surface he is about to address. He begins with the right armrest, starting at the front where it curves down to meet the front leg. The first stroke of sandpaper is always a moment of commitment, the point where assessment ends and action begins, where intention becomes reality. The paper makes a soft shushing sound as it moves across the wood, a whisper of friction that speaks of transformation beginning. The old varnish, brittle with age, begins to powder beneath the pressure, releasing a faint, dusty smell that mixes with the workshop's usual perfume of wood and oil. Thomas maintains a steady rhythm, his arm moving back and forth in long, even strokes, following the grain of the wood, never working against it. Back and forth, the motion becoming automatic, allowing his mind to settle into a quiet space where thought becomes unnecessary, and there is only sensation, only the feel of paper against wood, only the gradual revelation of what has been hidden. And then, as he works the sandpaper along the underside of the armrest, his finger encounters something unexpected. He pauses, his rhythm interrupted by curiosity. Setting down the sandpaper, he runs his fingertips more carefully across the area, feeling what his eyes cannot yet see in the shadows beneath the curved wood. There, carved into the surface with a careful hand, are letters. He shifts the chair slightly, angling it so the lamplight can reach this hidden spot, and then he sees them clearly. M.R. Margaret Rose, his grandmother's initials carved there by her own hand or perhaps by his grandfather as a young man, claiming this chair as particularly hers, marking it as special even among all the other furniture in a house full of well-loved things. Thomas sits back on his stool, a smile spreading slowly across his face, and for a moment he does nothing but look at those simple letters, feeling the presence they represent, the connection they offer across the years between then and now. This is exactly why he needed to be the one to restore this chair. This is exactly why it matters. The rhythm finds him gradually, settling into his body, the way certain songs can take up residence in your chest and make your heartbeat match their tempo. Back and forth, the sandpaper whispers its papery song against the walnut surface, and Thomas's breathing synchronizes with the motion until he cannot tell if his arm is moving because he wills it, or if the work itself is pulling him forward into its own inevitable cadence. The coarse paper strips away the old varnish in patches at first, creating a landscape of exposure, where bare wood shows through in irregular continents surrounded by oceans of darkened finish. But gradually, stroke by patient stroke, these islands grow and merge until the old surface has been entirely removed and only clean wood remains, slightly fuzzy with raised grain, ready for the finer papers that will smooth it into silk. His mind, freed from the need to direct his hands in their work, begins to wander down familiar paths of memory. He sees his grandmother's sitting room as it was 30 years ago, when he was still young enough to think of adults as permanent fixtures of the world, unchanging and eternal. The room had south-facing windows that caught the afternoon light and held it like honey in a jar, thick and golden and warm. The chair had sat in the bay window alcove, positioned so that Margaret could look out at her garden while she rocked, or could angle it slightly to face into the room when conversation or television required her attention. The chair had been beautiful then, its finish glowing with the deep luster that only comes from regular application of care and occasional polish, the wood grain visible beneath the varnish like rivers seen from a great height, flowing in patterns that suggested movement even in stillness. He remembers the specific creak the chair made, a sound that had become so associated with his grandmother that hearing it from another room would immediately bring her to mind. It was not a sharp sound, not a complaint, but rather a gentle commentary, a reminder that the chair was being used for its intended purpose, was fulfilling its function of holding and rocking and comforting. As a child, he had found that sound deeply reassuring. It meant his grandmother was near, meant that the world was as it should be, meant that there was a steady presence keeping watch over the household with calm and capable attention. Even now, working in his quiet workshop with only the rain for company, he can hear that creak in his memory, can almost feel the gentle motion of being rocked while small enough to fit comfortably in the chair with her, his head against her shoulder, her voice reading words that painted pictures in his imagination. The texture under his hands changes as he progresses to the medium grit paper, becoming less rough, more even. The wood's true color begins to emerge now, a rich brown with undertones of gold and red, beautiful in its variation and depth. Walnut is a forgiving wood to work with, he reflects, strong enough to endure hard use but not so dense that it resists the tools. It has a warmth to it that some other woods lack, a quality that makes it particularly suited for furniture that will be touched and used, that will become part of the daily landscape of a home. His grandmother had chosen well when she and his grandfather had purchased this chair in the early years of their marriage, though he doubts they were thinking about how it would endure, how it would outlast them both, and become a tangible connection between past and future. He pauses to brush away the accumulated dust, using one of his soft bristled brushes to sweep the armrest clean. The dust lifts in a small cloud, caught in the lamplight for a moment before dispersing, and he waves his hand gently to encourage it away from his work surface. The rain has intensified outside, no longer the tentative tapping of its beginning, but now a steady drumming that creates a cocoon of white noise around the workshop, insulating this space from the wider world. Thomas finds himself grateful for this weather, for the way it justifies his retreat into this quiet room, gives him permission to ignore whatever else might be calling for his attention. Tonight, there is only this chair, these tools, these hands, and the slow, magical process of restoration. Moving to the second armrest, he repeats the process, beginning again with the coarser paper, establishing the rhythm once more, finding that meditative state where time becomes meaningless and there is only the endless present moment of work. The motions are the same, the sounds are the same. The gradual transformation from rough to smooth follows the same inevitable progression. Yet he does not find this repetitive in any negative sense. Rather, there is something deeply satisfying about the predictability of it, the way that patient persistence always yields results, the way that simple, continued effort accumulates into significant change. This is perhaps the deepest lesson that woodworking has taught him over the years. This understanding that most worthwhile things cannot be rushed, that quality emerges from the accumulation of care rather than from any single moment of brilliance. His thoughts drift to the various hands that have gripped these armrests over the decades. His grandmother's hands, of course, small and soft-skinned, but surprisingly strong, capable of kneading bread or pulling weeds or holding a wriggling child with equal competence. His grandfather's hands, too, larger and more weathered, stained with the honest dirt of a man who worked outdoors, who grew things and built things and fixed things with a practical skill that Thomas now recognizes as its own form of artistry. His mother's hands had rested here during visits, during the long afternoons when she and his grandmother would sit together and talk about things he was too young to understand or care about, their voices creating a murmur in the background of his play. And his own hands, of course, as a child reaching up to grip the armrest while standing beside the chair, looking up at his grandmother's face, waiting for her attention, or her wisdom, or simply her presence. The wood continues to reveal itself under his patient attention, each stroke of the sandpaper removing another microscopic layer, bringing him closer to the truth of the material beneath. There are small imperfections that become visible as the finish is stripped away, tiny knots and variations in the grain that were hidden before, and Thomas examines each of these with interest, reading them as evidence of the tree's life before it became furniture, the years of growth and weather and survival that created this particular piece of wood with its particular characteristics. These small irregularities do not diminish the wood's beauty, but rather enhance it, providing evidence of authenticity, proof that this is real material, with a real history, rather than some manufactured simulation of wood. He moves to the spindles now, those delicate vertical pieces that form the back of the chair, and here his work requires even more attention because the rounded surfaces need to be sanded evenly all around their circumference, and it is easy to create flat spots or uneven areas if one is not careful. He tears the sandpaper into smaller pieces that he can wrap around each spindle, creating a flexible sanding surface that conforms to the curve. Then, holding the paper in both hands, he moves it back and forth around the spindle in a motion that resembles the old-fashioned way of starting a fire with a bow drill, the friction of the paper against wood, generating heat and dust and gradual transformation. The rhythm here is different, more contained, more focused, but no less meditative. Back and forth around each spindle, ensuring even coverage, checking frequently with his fingers to feel for smoothness, for consistency, for the satisfying evenness that indicates good work. The lamplight creates interesting shadows on the curved surfaces as he works, and Thomas finds himself occasionally pausing just to observe the play of light and dark, the way the spindles seem to glow from within when the light catches them at certain angles. There is something almost hypnotic about this, something that pulls him deeper into the peaceful trance of focused work, where the boundaries between himself and the task blur, and there is only the doing, only the continuous present moment of attention and response. This is what he loves most about restoration work, this complete absorption, this merging of intention and action into a unified flow where nothing else exists or matters. Time passes, though Thomas could not say how much. The rain continues, sometimes louder, sometimes softer, providing a constantly shifting background to his work. His back begins to ache slightly from maintaining his posture on the low stool, and he stands occasionally to stretch, rolling his shoulders, arching his spine, giving his body the care it needs to continue. During these brief pauses, he steps back to examine his progress, using both his eyes and his hands to assess the work, running his palms over surfaces he has already finished to check for smoothness, to identify any areas that might need additional attention. The chair is beginning to transform before him, the parts he has completed showing as lighter, cleaner, somehow more alive than the sections still waiting for his attention. He returns to his stool, selects the finest grade of sandpaper, and begins the final stage of smoothing. This paper is almost soft to the touch, its grit so fine that it feels more like fabric than anything abrasive, yet it performs the final magic of creating a surface so smooth that it seems to generate its own light. The wood under this treatment becomes luminous, takes on a depth and warmth that makes it seem almost liquid, as if the solid material has somehow softened into something more fluid and alive. Thomas works even more slowly now, savoring this stage, knowing that this is where the true beauty of the wood fully reveals itself, where all the previous work justifies itself in the creation of something approaching perfection. His strokes are lighter here, gentler, more caress than scrape, and the sound the paper makes is barely audible, a whisper so soft it almost disappears into the rain's white noise. As Thomas works the finest sandpaper across the seat of the chair, following the gentle depression worn by decades of use, the walnut's true character emerges in patterns that make him pause and simply observe. The grain swirls in the lamplight like smoke frozen in wood, like water captured mid-flow, creating whirls and rivers and eddies that speak of the tree's growth rings, the years of its life before it was harvested and transformed into furniture. There are subtle variations in color too, bands of darker brown alternating with lighter golden tones, creating a natural striping that no human craftsman could design or replicate. This is the beauty that had been hiding beneath the old cracked finish, the beauty that his grandmother had chosen all those years ago when the chair was new, though the varnish had eventually obscured it, and time had dulled its impact. He runs his palm across the seat's surface, feeling the silkiness that hours of careful sanding have created, feeling the warmth of the wood as if it were a living thing responding to his touch. There is something deeply satisfying about this moment, about seeing and feeling the results of patient work, about knowing that he has brought this wood back to something approaching its original glory. But more than that, there is a sense of connection, of having engaged in a kind of conversation with the material, of having listened to what it needed and responded appropriately. This is the secret that good craftspeople understand, but have difficulty explaining to others. This relationship between maker and material, this collaboration between human intention and the inherent properties of wood or metal or clay. As he shifts his position to reach the back edge of the seat, his hand encounters something unexpected. There is a slight irregularity in the underside of the seat, a linear indentation that his fingers identify as deliberate rather than accidental. He bends down to look more closely, angling his head to see into the shadows beneath the seat, and discovers what his fingers have found. It is a small drawer, cunningly fitted into the thickness of the seat itself, invisible from above or from the sides, accessible only from below and only if you know to look for it. The drawer is perhaps 6 inches wide and 8 inches long, shallow but perfectly crafted, its edges fitted so precisely that it had been invisible under the old finish and the accumulated dirt of years. Thomas sits back on his heels, surprised and delighted by this discovery. He had known this chair since childhood, had been lifted onto it, and had climbed up into it countless times, and yet he had never known this drawer existed. Had his grandmother known about it? Had she used it? Or had it been forgotten, its presence lost to memory and time, waiting all these years to be found again? His fingers find the small recessed area that serves as a pull, and he tugs gently, carefully, feeling the drawer resist for a moment before sliding smoothly open on wooden runners that still work perfectly despite their age and disuse. Inside the drawer, nestled as if placed there just moments ago rather than years or decades past, is a folded handkerchief. The fabric is fine cotton or linen, aged to a soft cream color, and even before Thomas lifts it from its resting place, he can see the delicate embroidery decorating one corner. His hands are surprisingly steady as he picks up the handkerchief, though his heart has quickened its pace, beating a little faster with the strange emotion that comes from encountering unexpected evidence of a loved one's life, touching something that they touched, finding a small piece of them preserved in an object. He unfolds the fabric carefully, spreading it across his palm, and the embroidery reveals itself fully. It is a cluster of flowers, worked in thread, that must once have been bright blue and violet, but has faded to softer, more ethereal shades. The stitches are tiny and precise, creating a delicate image that speaks of patient hours spent with needle and thread, creating beauty for its own sake. He lifts the handkerchief to his face almost without thinking, and there, impossibly preserved in the fibers, is the faint scent of lavender. His grandmother had kept lavender sachets in her dresser drawers, he remembers now with sudden clarity. The flowers had come from her own garden, dried and sewn into small fabric bags that released their perfume slowly, scenting everything they touched with that distinctive herbal sweetness. That this scent has survived, that it has waited here in darkness all these years to deliver this message across time, seems almost miraculous. Thomas finds his eyes are wet, though he is not precisely crying, not in the sense of grief or loss. Rather, this is the emotion of connection, of feeling close to someone who is gone, of being given an unexpected gift of remembrance. He sits there for a long moment, the handkerchief still held against his face, breathing in that faded lavender scent and letting it carry him back through the years. He sees his grandmother at her garden, sees her bending among the lavender plants with her scissors, cutting the flower spikes at their peak and gathering them in her apron, sees her in her kitchen, hanging the lavender in bunches to dry from the ceiling beams, the whole room filled with purple and fragrance, sees her at her sewing table by the window, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her hands busy with needle and thread, creating these small, perfect flowers that would decorate a handkerchief, that would be folded and placed in a secret drawer and forgotten, that would wait like a message in a bottle to be discovered by her grandson in a quiet workshop while rain falls outside. He folds the handkerchief carefully, returning it to its original creases, honoring the way it was placed, but instead of returning it to the hidden drawer, he sets it aside on his workbench where he can see it, where its presence can inform the rest of his work this evening. This is no longer just a restoration of a piece of furniture. This has become something more, something deeper. He is not just repairing wood and applying finish. He is honoring a life, preserving evidence of a person who mattered, who touched the world with gentle hands and left behind these small, beautiful things. The chair is not just a chair. It is a repository of memory, a tangible connection to love and care and the quiet daily acts that make up a life worth living. He returns to his work with renewed purpose, but also with a deeper calm. There is no hurry here, no deadline that matters. What matters is doing this right, giving this chair the attention and care it deserves, treating it not as an object, but as a sacred trust. His hands move across the wood with even more gentleness now, with a tenderness that goes beyond mere craft. He is touching something his grandmother touched, is caring for something she cared for, and in this act of restoration, he is maintaining a connection that death could not sever. The wood seems to respond to this heightened attention, seems to glow a little brighter under his hands, or perhaps that is just the lamplight, or perhaps it is the way his perception has shifted, the way this discovery has opened his heart to seeing more deeply, feeling more fully. Thomas sets down his sandpaper and simply sits for a moment, his hands resting on his thighs, his breath coming easily and deeply. The work has reached a natural pause point. All the surfaces that require sanding have been addressed, taken through the progression from coarse to fine, brought to a smooth perfection that pleases both eye and hand. The chair before him glows softly in the lamplight, its wood grain revealed in all its natural beauty, its curves and angles clean and ready for the next stage of restoration. But Thomas himself needs a moment to simply be, to let his body rest from the repetitive motions of the past hours, to let his mind surface from the deep meditative state that focused work creates. He stands slowly, feeling the stiffness in his lower back from sitting on the low stool, the tightness in his shoulders from the repetitive motion of sanding. He stretches, reaching his arms above his head and feeling his spine lengthen, hearing small pops and cracks as joints readjust themselves. The workshop is warm from his body heat, and the lamps glow comfortable and close like a favorite sweater. Outside, the rain has settled into a steady medium rhythm, no longer heavy but far from finished, the kind of rain that seems like it might continue all night, that creates a sense of being sheltered and protected, of being fortunate to be inside and dry while the world outside is washed clean. He moves to the small corner of his workshop, where he keeps a kettle and a hot plate, a concession to the long hours he sometimes spends here, to the need for warm drinks during cold work sessions. The kettle is old, its copper exterior darkened with age and use, but it still boils water reliably, still releases its cheerful whistle when the steam demands attention. He fills it from a large jug of water he keeps stored nearby, then sets it on the hot plate and switches on the heat. While he waits for the water to boil, he selects a tea bag from the small tin where he keeps them, choosing chamomile tonight for its gentle, calming properties, its promise of relaxation and eventual sleep. The kettle begins to murmur as the water heats, a soft sound that blends with the rain, and Thomas finds himself simply standing there, watching the surface of the workbench without really seeing it, his mind pleasantly empty, his body tired in the good way that comes from physical work well done. This is perhaps his favorite moment in any project. This pause between stages when the work already completed can be appreciated, but the work still ahead has not yet demanded his attention. It is a moment of pure, present tense existence, free from regret about the past or anxiety about the future, simply occupying space and breathing and being alive. The kettle's whistle pulls him from his reverie, and he pours the boiling water over the tea bag in his favorite mug, a heavy ceramic piece with a good handle that his daughter made in a pottery class years ago. The glaze is uneven, and the shape is slightly lopsided, but these imperfections make it more dear to him, evidence of human hands shaping clay, of someone learning a craft, of his child making something for him with care and intention. He lets the tea steep while he tidies his immediate work area, sweeping the accumulated sawdust into a pile with a small hand brush, collecting the used sandpaper and disposing of it, organizing his remaining tools back into their proper places. This tidying is its own form of meditation, a way of honoring the workspace, of maintaining the order that allows good work to happen. With his mug of chamomile in hand, steam rising and carrying the sweet herbal scent into the air, Thomas returns to his stool beside the chair. But instead of resuming work immediately, he simply sits and looks at what he has accomplished so far. The transformation is already remarkable. The chair that had seemed tired and worn now appears renewed, vital, almost eager in the way it catches and reflects the lamplight. The wood's natural beauty has been revealed, yes, but more than that, the chair's essential character has been restored. It looks like itself again, like the chair from his memories, and this pleases him deeply. He sips his tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through his chest, feeling his muscles begin to relax more fully now that he has given them permission to rest. His gaze drifts around the workshop, taking in the familiar landscape of his tools and projects, the accumulated evidence of his life's work, hanging on walls and sitting on shelves. There is a satisfaction in being surrounded by the instruments and materials of one's craft, in being in a space that is entirely devoted to making and mending and bringing things into being. This room is more than just a workplace to him. It is a sanctuary, a place where the noise and confusion of the wider world cannot reach him, where he can focus entirely on the simple, clear problems that have simple, clear solutions. Sand the wood until it is smooth. Apply the finish until it glows. These are tasks with visible results, with clear measures of success or failure, and there is a comfort in that clarity that he has come to deeply value. His thoughts return to the handkerchief, still lying on his workbench where he placed it, the embroidered flowers visible in the lamplight. He thinks about his grandmother and the life she lived, the quiet dignity with which she moved through her days, the care she brought to small tasks, the way she made everyone around her feel seen and valued. She had not been famous or wealthy or powerful by any conventional measure, but she had been rich in the things that actually matter, rich in love and connection, and the ability to find joy in simple pleasures. The chair is evidence of this, he realizes. She could have chosen something flashy or expensive, could have filled her home with status symbols and impressive objects. Instead, she chose a simple, well-made rocking chair and used it faithfully for decades, rocking in it while she read, while she knitted, while she watched her garden grow and change with the seasons. He finishes his tea and sets the mug aside, feeling ready now to continue. The rest has restored not just his body but his spirit, has given him the renewed energy and focus he will need for the next stage. Applying finish is delicate work, requiring steady hands and careful attention, and he wants to approach it in the right state of mind, with the proper respect for the complexity of the task. He stands and moves to the shelf where he keeps his finishing materials, selecting a can of natural linseed oil that he has used for years, that has never failed to bring out the best in walnut. This oil will penetrate deep into the wood grain, will nourish the fibers and bring out the richest possible color, will create a finish that is both protective and beautiful, that will last for decades with minimal maintenance. Thomas pours a small amount of the linseed oil into a shallow dish, watching as the amber liquid pools and settles, thick and rich and smelling of seeds and earth. The scent is pleasant, natural, a reminder that this finish comes from living plants, from flax grown in sunny fields and processed to extract this precious oil. He selects a clean, soft cloth from his collection, folding it into a pad that will hold the oil without dripping, that will allow him to apply an even coat with controlled pressure. This is the moment he has been working toward all evening, the culmination of hours of preparation, the point where the chair will begin its final transformation from bare wood to finished piece. He dips the cloth into the oil, letting it absorb just enough to be damp but not soaking, and then he positions himself beside the chair, ready to begin. The first touch of oil to wood is always a moment of minor magic, the instant when the wood's true color reveals itself, when what has been pale and muted suddenly deepens and glows. Thomas places the cloth against the wood of the right armrest and begins to work the oil into the surface using slow circular motions, feeling the wood drink in the nourishment, watching as the walnut transforms beneath his hand from a soft brown to a rich chocolate shot through with veins of gold and amber. The motion he uses is hypnotic, repetitive, deeply calming. Circular strokes that overlap and blend, ensuring even coverage, making sure that every pore of the wood receives its share of the oil. His hand moves almost of its own accord, guided by decades of experience, knowing instinctively how much pressure to apply, how long to work each area, when to add more oil and when to simply buff what is already there. The cloth moves across the wood in endless loops, like water flowing, like the wind moving across fields of grain, and Thomas feels himself sinking deeper into a state of focused tranquility, where his breathing slows and his heartbeat becomes a distant, steady pulse, and there is nothing in the universe except his hand and the wood and the oil connecting them. The walnut seems to come alive under this treatment, seems to glow from within, as if the oil has awakened some dormant light that was sleeping in the wood grain. The swirling patterns of the grain become more pronounced, more dramatic, creating an almost three-dimensional effect where the wood seems to have depth, seems to extend down into layers you could fall into if you looked too long. Thomas has seen this effect hundreds of times in his career, has finished countless pieces of walnut furniture, but it never fails to move him, never becomes routine or expected. Each piece of wood is unique, has its own character and beauty, and revealing that beauty is always a privilege, always a gift. He moves methodically around the chair, working the oil into each section with the same patient circular motions, ensuring that every surface receives equal attention, that no area is neglected or rushed. The spindles require careful work, turning them as he applies the oil so that all sides are covered evenly, making sure the oil does not pool or drip but rather spreads in a thin, consistent layer that will dry properly and create a smooth finish. The seat receives extra attention, multiple applications of oil worked in thoroughly, because this is the surface that will see the most use, that will need to be most durable and most resistant to wear. As he works, Thomas finds his mind returning again and again to his grandmother, to memories that surface unbidden but welcome, called forth perhaps by the act of caring for this object that was so intimately connected to her daily life. He remembers summer afternoons when he would visit her house, how she would be in her chair by the window, how the air would smell of her baking and of the roses that grew just outside, how she would set aside her book or her knitting and open her arms to him, gathering him into a hug that smelled of powder and lavender and something else that was just uniquely her. He remembers how safe he felt in her presence, how certain he was that nothing bad could happen while she was watching over him. how her calm, steady attention made him feel important and valued and seen. The oil application is complete now, every surface of the chair glistening wetly in the lamplight, dark and rich and beautiful. But the work is not finished. The oil needs to be allowed to penetrate for several minutes, and then the excess must be buffed away, wiped clean so that what remains is only the oil that has soaked into the wood fibers, not the surplus sitting on the surface. Thomas sets down his oiling cloth and takes up a fresh dry cloth, clean and soft, and after waiting the appropriate time, he begins the buffing process. This is gentler work than the application, more caressing than wiping, using just enough pressure to remove the excess oil while stimulating the wood to bring out its maximum luster. The chair seems to respond to this final attention, seems to settle into its new finish with a kind of satisfaction. The wet gleam fades to a softer glow, a luminosity that comes from within rather than from surface reflection, and the wood takes on a depth and warmth that makes it seem almost alive, almost breathing. Thomas buffs each section carefully, turning the cloth frequently to expose clean areas, working until his arm is tired and the cloth is saturated with oil, and the chair before him looks perfect, looks complete, looks like something worthy of being handed down through generations, of being treasured and used and loved. He steps back to observe his work from a slight distance, and what he sees fills him with a quiet pride that needs no external validation. The chair is beautiful. More than that, it is itself again, restored to the fullness of its potential, ready to serve for decades more, to provide comfort and gentle motion and a place of rest for whoever needs it. The walnut glows in the lamplight like captured sunshine, warm and inviting, and the curves and lines of the chair's construction are highlighted by the finish, made visible and appreciable in a way they had not been under the old cracked varnish. This is good work. This is work that honors the original craftsman who built the chair, that honors his grandmother who cherished it, that honors the tree that gave its wood to become this useful, beautiful thing. Thomas feels a deep satisfaction settling into his chest, a warmth that has nothing to do with the workshop's temperature, and everything to do with the completion of a task done well, with the keeping of a promise made to himself and to memory. He has brought this chair back. He has saved it from deterioration and neglect, and in doing so, he has preserved something precious, has maintained a connection to a person and a past that matter to him, has created something tangible that can be touched and used and passed forward in time. This is perhaps the deepest reward of restoration work, this sense of having participated in something larger than oneself, of having served as a link in a chain that extends backward into history and forward into an unknown future. The rain outside has gentled to almost nothing now, just the occasional soft patter of drops falling from the eaves, the last remnants of the storm moving on to water, other gardens, other roofs, other lives. The night has deepened around the workshop, the darkness outside the windows complete and close, making the lamp's golden glow seem even warmer and more welcoming by contrast. Thomas realizes that he has no idea what time it is, has lost track entirely during his hours of focused work, but it does not matter. Time spent in meaningful work is never wasted, never lost. It accumulates instead into something valuable, something that remains when the hours themselves have passed into memory. Thomas takes up another clean cloth and begins the final buffing, the last gentle polishing that will bring the finish to its ultimate perfection. His strokes are light now, barely more than a caress, moving across the wood in long, smooth passes that enhance the glow without disturbing the oil that has soaked into the grain. This is meditative work at its purest, requiring no thought, no decision-making, only the continued gentle motion of hand over wood, cloth against finish, care manifesting as touch. The chair seems to drink in this final attention, seems to relax into its completed state, and Thomas finds himself relaxing with it, his breathing deep and slow, his muscles loose, his mind quiet and clear. When the buffing is complete, when every surface has been attended to and the cloth comes away clean with no trace of excess oil, Thomas sets down his materials and simply looks at what he has created. Created is perhaps the wrong word, because he did not make this chair, did not shape the wood or join the pieces or design its form, but he has participated in its continued existence, has intervened at a critical moment to prevent its deterioration, has brought it back from the edge of being forgotten and discarded, and in that sense, he has created something new from something old, has given it a second life, a renewed purpose. The chair sits before him in the lamplight, and it is beautiful. He moves to his supply shelf and retrieves a clean sheet, a piece of old soft cotton that he keeps for covering work in progress, for protecting finished pieces while they cure and dry. He unfolds it carefully and drapes it over the chair, tucking it gently around the curves and angles, creating a soft cocoon that will keep dust away and protect the fresh oil as it continues its slow work of penetrating and hardening over the next several days. The draped form is ghostly in the lamplight, mysterious and peaceful, and Thomas finds himself thinking of his grandmother again, of how she would cover furniture with sheets when preparing to be away from home for a time, creating a house full of soft white shapes that looked like benevolent spirits waiting patiently for life to return. He begins the final tidying of his workspace, moving slowly now, tired in his bones but satisfied in his soul. The dish that held the oil is wiped clean and returned to its shelf. The cloths are gathered and set aside to be properly disposed of later, because oil-soaked rags are a fire hazard if not handled carefully, their tendency to spontaneous combustion a danger that every woodworker learns to respect. His tools are checked and cleaned, each one restored to its proper place, the workshop gradually returning to its normal order, ready for whatever project might come next, whenever that might be. Thomas pauses at his workbench and picks up the handkerchief, the embroidered flowers soft against his fingertips. He folds it carefully, honoring its delicate age, and slips it into his shirt pocket where it will rest close to his heart. Tomorrow he will find a proper place for it, perhaps a small frame where it can be displayed and appreciated, where the flowers his grandmother stitched so carefully can be seen and remembered. But tonight it will stay with him, a talisman, a tangible connection to love and memory and the quiet beauty of things made by hand with care and patience. He moves to the lamp and turns it down, reducing its glow to the dimmest setting, just enough light to see by, just enough to keep the complete darkness at bay. The workshop transforms in this reduced light, becomes a place of shadows and soft shapes, peaceful and quiet and ready for rest. The draped chair sits in the center of the space like a guardian presence, like something watching over the room, and Thomas finds himself grateful for its company, grateful that it will be here tomorrow and the day after, gradually curing, gradually settling into its renewed state, ready eventually to take its place in his home, to provide comfort and gentle motion to whoever might need it. He takes one last long look around the workshop, making sure everything is as it should be, making sure no tools have been left where they might be damaged, no materials left exposed to air or moisture. Satisfied that all is well, he moves to the door and places his hand on the light switch, but before turning it off entirely, he pauses and looks back at the covered chair one final time. Thank you, he thinks, though he is not entirely sure what he is thanking or who. Thank you for the work, thank you for the memories, thank you for the connection, thank you for the peace. Then he switches off the lamp, and the workshop falls into darkness, and he steps outside into the cool, damp air of the night, closing the door gently behind him, leaving the chair to rest and cure and wait for morning. The rain has stopped entirely now, and the air smells clean and fresh, washed free of dust and pollen and the accumulated grime of the day. Above, between breaking clouds, a few stars are visible, distant and bright and eternal. Thomas stands for a moment in his driveway, looking up at them, feeling very small and very connected all at once, part of something vast and incomprehensible, but also part of something intimate and immediate, part of the long chain of human beings who have worked with their hands and loved with their hearts, and tried to leave the world a little better than they found it. Then he turns toward his house, toward warmth and rest and the sleep that his tired body is now demanding, carrying with him the satisfaction of work completed, the comfort of memory honored, and the quiet joy of having spent an evening in the company of wood and tools, and the gentle presence of love that persists beyond the boundaries of a single life. The story has reached its natural resting place now, has brought you through an evening of patient work and gentle memory, of transformation accomplished through care and attention, of connection maintained across the distance of years and the finality of death. The chair that was worn and neglected has been restored. The memory that was fading has been refreshed and honored. The work that was needed has been completed. And if this story has done its work as well, then perhaps you too have found some measure of peace, some quieting of the busy mind, some gentling of the restless body. Perhaps you have been carried by the rhythm of sanding and oiling, by the hypnotic repetition of careful work, toward the edge of sleep, toward that soft country where consciousness releases its grip and allows the deeper rest to take over. For those of you who are still listening, who have traveled all the way through this evening with Thomas and his grandmother's chair, who have witnessed the patient restoration of something beautiful and meaningful, I thank you for your attention. If you found something of value here, if this story brought you even a small measure of calm or comfort or peace, then perhaps you might consider sharing that gift with others who might need it. A quiet like helps these stories find their way to people who are searching for exactly this kind of gentle companionship in the late hours. And if you choose to subscribe, our small collection of peaceful stories will be here waiting for you whenever you need a bridge between the noise of the day and the quiet of the night. May your sleep be deep and dreamless, or if dreams come, may they be gentle ones filled with warm light and patient hands and the satisfaction of work well done. May you wake refreshed and ready, carrying with you perhaps some small echo of the peace we found tonight in a quiet workshop while rain fell and a chair was brought back to beauty. Thank you for letting these words accompany you through this evening. Thank you for trusting this story to guide you toward rest. Sleep well and know that these tales will be here whenever you need them, ready to welcome you back into their quiet embrace. Good night.